And now we are so excited to hear from Senator Van Hollen. Senator?
Well, thank you. I'm trying to access my video here. Let me see if I can get it. There we go. All right. Well, thank you.
Hi, Senator. You're my senator, by the way. I'm in Maryland.
Well, thank you for all you're doing here with Patriotic Millionaires. I was just listening in, and you're doing such an important public service to expose what a national scandal our tax code has become, and how it simply makes income and wealth inequality even worse when we would want to design a system that would reduce wealth inequality and income inequality. So I want to thank you, and great to have you as a Maryland constituent. I also want to thank Chairman Morris Burrell. I've seen him from time to time in person, of course, in pre-pandemic days, and the Vice Chair, Stephen Prince, and Chuck Collins. Thank all of you for the important work that you're doing and have been doing for years to expose the scandal of the American tax code and educate Americans so that we can bring about the important change that we need to. I was just listening to Chuck, and it is true, the pandemic has only worsened the wealth inequality and income inequality in America. You've seen the most vulnerable, those at the lower end of the income scale, losing their jobs in droves, but those at the very top, those who are primarily awarded through the stock market, of course, have not felt it at all. We call this a K-shaped recovery. For the wealthy, those who are making most of their income through the stock market, it's been pretty much a V-shape. There was a little bit of a dip, and now it's right back up. But for everybody else, they went down and then flatlined, especially those who were unemployed. And if you compare where we are today to where we were in February, 12% of low-wage jobs have been lost entirely, whereas, as we just said, those on the stock market are doing just fine. And in fact, the Federal Reserve just put out sort of shocking new data. It reinforces what we already knew, but coming from the Federal Reserve, I think it's worth citing that the 50 richest Americans, just the top 50, own the same amount of wealth as the 165 million people in the bottom half of the wealth distribution. Top 50 richest Americans owning the same amount of wealth as 165 million Americans. And what we've seen is that this chasm between the rich and others just growing and growing over time. And as was mentioned earlier, in the face of this growing inequality, what do we see our Republican colleagues and President Trump do? They passed a tax law that makes it even worse. And we heard about the stock buybacks. We heard about the windfalls for people who are already very well off. And this is part of the myth of trickle-down economics, which doesn't, it's a bad idea that never seems to die among Republicans. But all of you sort of put the lie to that myth. It does, by giving tax windfalls to the wealthy, help raise the yachts even higher, but all the boats get stranded. And that's what we saw in 2017. Now, there are things we can do. We've got to move from what I call a dynastic economy to a dynamic economy, an economy that actually lives up to the promise of the American dream. I mean, the idea of America, of course, is that if you work hard every day, you can get ahead. But we have a tax code that does not reward hard work. What it does is reward those folks who we saw on an earlier slide, who are making their income off the stock market, or they've inherited their income. And so we actually punish hard work relative to income gained through non-work, through money made off of money. So we need to change that, and there are a number of proposals. I want to just mention a few, and I want to thank the Patriotic Millionaires for supporting piece of legislation that I've introduced called the Millionaires Surtax Act. And this is a very simple concept and very practical to implement. What it does, very simply, is apply a 10% tax to all annual income above $2 million for married couples and above $1 million for individuals. This doesn't require a massive overhaul of the tax code. It really requires just a few lines of addition to the tax code. And some of the biggest loopholes and deductions that millionaires use to game the system won't work against a surtax because it applies equally to income from work and from unearned income. In other words, the discussion you had about stock gains, capital gains, it applies equally to all forms of income. The 10% surtax does. And if you look at this proposal, 99.8% of Americans, let me just say that again, 99.8% of Americans won't pay any additional tax. So we're talking about 2 out of 1,000 people. And I think it's a very important and very quick step that we can take. And I know Chairman Pearl, on behalf of Patriotic Millionaires, endorsed this last year. I will also point out that it is very popular throughout the country. 73% of Americans support the millionaire surtax, including a majority of people who support President Trump. And so this is something that we can, I hope, move very quickly on, because in addition to reducing income inequality, it also, of course, generates important revenue for us to invest in helping other Americans get ahead, whether it's in early education, K through 12, a whole range of other areas where we desperately need more investment so that more people can achieve the American dream through hard work. Now, another measure that I plan on introducing before the end of the year relates to another major topic that you were discussing, which is closing the stepped-up basis loophole that allows people to pass on wealth from one generation to the next untaxed, avoiding income taxes altogether. Chuck and others mentioned this, and you described how the mechanism works. And ultimately, we have a loophole here that is subsidizing wealthy family dynasties by letting them accumulate wealth and passing it on totally tax-free. And so if we take the millionaires surtax idea, if we close down, stepped up basis, we'll be addressing some of the biggest components of our current tax system that continue to reward wealth over work. So let me end there. I want to thank all of you. I'm happy to try and answer any questions on where we go, but let me close where I started, which is thanking all of you, Patriotic Millionaires, who are focused on this important issue for our country. To those who are listening, we think of ourselves as a country where people who work hard can get ahead. But if you actually compare us to, what we called old Europe, aristocratic Europe, feudal Europe, we actually see less upward mobility in the United States than in feudal old Europe. So we have unfortunately strayed a long way from our idea of the American dream. And tragically, we have a tax code that actually reinforces all the worst aspects of that trend. So I'm looking forward to changing this so that we have a fair tax code, one that doesn't reward wealth over work, and one that generates the revenue we need to make important investments so that people who are working hard every day to get ahead can do so. So thank you all for being part of the solution, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Absolutely. We have lots of
Bravo.
questions. We have lots of questions from the audience. So what about rich people who just don't pay what they already owe? And we've seen some reports about the tax dodging from the biggest, the richest people in the country is going to cost us about $5 trillion over the next 10 years, Senator. Raising rates doesn't help much if they can just break the law and have nothing bad happen. How are we going to fix this? I mean, rich people just dodging.
Well, we do need. I've long argued that the IRS has to follow the Willie Sutton rule, go where the money is, and they should be using their resources to go after those individuals who owe a lot of taxes and are using various schemes and lots of lawyers to dodge them. Now, there are those, of course, who are not paying and illegally not paying. There are, of course, those that are using, very fancy measures to shield their income from taxes. So these are two separate issues. One is getting the IRS the resources and getting them focused on where the money is. The other, of course, is shutting down the loopholes that allow people to, in many cases, legally shield so much money. We don't know what combination of that applies to President Trump. We saw that he paid $750. That may be a combination of illegally not paying taxes, or it could be just using the outrageous tax breaks that are in our tax code, or some combination of that.
Senator Van Hollen, 71% of Americans think the economy is rigged, and we're a little bit confused about why the other 29% don't think it's rigged. But be that as it may, one of the things that we talk about a lot is that people understand that they feel the economy is rigged, but they don't connect that to the rigging through the tax code, that the tax code is actually what in large part rigs it. How can we help people make this connection so that they don't just hear, oh, we're going to raise taxes? How can we connect this better for them?
Well, I think the way you laid it out in your presentations really underscores the point here, and we just need to amplify this message because there are two things that are happening out there. One is that some people are just resigned to a rigged system, and so you don't see the level of outrage because people just don't think they can change it. We can change it. We just need the votes to change it. Like so many other things, if we get our 51 votes in the Senate and we get our majority in the House and the president has signed the bill, we can pass these measures, including the millionaire surtax that I mentioned, and get rid of the stepped up basis loophole. So we can do this. I think the point that you underscored, that we have a tax code that rewards wealth over work. As I say, it rewards people who make money off of money rather than people who make money from hard work. I think that idea that we have a system that is dynastic instead of dynamic is one that I think we can break through on and connect.
We talk about that as their money versus your sweat. And in that battle, their money always wins. All right, so I'll kick this one to Morris. I saw somewhere that America is now more unequal than France before the French Revolution. Isn't it in the interest of wealthy people to level the playing field a bit, Morris?
Well, yes, that's why I'm here. We're trying to do that. I am concerned about what's going to happen next. I'm older than most of you. I remember what happened in South Africa in the 1970s and 80s. That inequality did not end well for the rich people. That's all I have to say.
And let's see. So, Chuck, we have a question about if we pass tax cuts for the rich, then won't the rich give less to charity?
Well, I think it is important to underscore that philanthropy does really good work and it funds useful things, but it's not a substitute for a fair tax system where wealthy people pay their fair share. And I think we're starting to see a trend where wealthy people, in addition to hiding their money through legal means and illegal means, are also moving more money into charity and philanthropy. And that's a form of private power. it's, whereas I think when we tax and together, raise revenue to make investments, that's a democratic process. So, it may be that some multimillionaires and billionaires, if we rewire the tax code the right way, will give less to charity, but they'll be paying more taxes, and they'll be paying into the public investment funds that are democratically controlled.
Stephen,
Yes, ma'am.
anything to add?
Well, I always keep coming back to, there are several questions in there talking about how do we fix this, and how we fix it is we have to figure out some sort of mechanism for showing people that they're voting for the wrong causes when they're voting for a lot of the people that they're voting for. I mean, let's talk about the 35% of America that are following our president just blindly wherever he goes. They don't understand the significance of the issue that they're ignoring, and that is tax code. They get caught up in a wall. They get caught up in keeping Muslims out of America, letting them have their guns. They get caught up in all these issues that really are not as important to them in their lives as the simple tax code. It's not simple. The complex tax code. How we are taxed in this country and how we pay those taxes is much more important than a wall between us and Mexico, or whether we let Muslims or any other constituency from around the world come in. But the president has done a phenomenal job, and the Republicans continue to do a phenomenal job of emotionalizing these nonsensical issues and getting the electorate to ignore the one that's most important to them, tax code.
We focus all of our work, Senator, on money and power, which are the two most important things in a capitalist democracy. So John and James have some interesting questions. Senator, why not have the surtax be more than 10%? Why is the surtax only proposed at 10%? Maybe 25 is a better number. What do you think?
So look, I'm open to different options. I think that what we'd want to do is look to make sure that we could get the same kind of support for that. Maybe we could. So look, I'm not 10%. Obviously, the number we pick is somewhat arbitrary, and so it could go up. Other proposals have had lower ones. Some have had, I think, sometimes higher, but 10% is what we settled on. But there's no magic to 10%. I think, a lot of this is also going to be driven by what revenue needs are required to make important investments in our economy, and making sure we can invest in more good paying jobs around the country. And so I think we're going to have to figure out, how all these different proposals work together, including the stepped up basis proposal, including, proposals we've seen from the Biden campaign in terms of, capping deductions at certain levels. I think we just need to look at the combination of things here, but I'm not adverse to looking at another number.
And Senator, here's another one. What is the appetite among your Senate colleagues on the Democratic side to have the wealthy pay their fair share through tax increases? And will it be high on the agenda should Democrats move into power this fall?
I think people in our caucus, in the Democratic caucus, overwhelmingly recognize that we have a totally broken tax system, which has, as we've been discussing, penalizes work relative to income earned over wealth, and that we need to change that. And as I mentioned in my remarks, the public agrees. And so that obviously helps, that public sentiment showing over 75% of the American people supporting the millionaire surtax is something that I think will also help push this over the finish line. I'm quite confident that we'll be able to see a number of measures adopted as we move forward. I mean, but again, it does, as the question indicates, it does all come down to votes.
And maybe I'll kick this one a little bit to Chuck. Can you explain more how we can go about reforming the estate tax and the inheritance tax exemption? So y'all saw from the presentation, it's 11 million and then 22 million for a couple, which is kind of insane. But then they have done this whole marketing campaign around the death tax. So Chuck, what are your thoughts about how we should attack this?
Well, I've been trying to work for 20 years to defend the estate tax, and it's been an uphill battle. The number of estates that are actually paying the tax is shrinking. People use a lot of the loopholes that Senator Van Hollen talked about, dynasty trusts and all these ways to get around it and reduce their estates. So it's been subject to a lot of gaming, and the amount of revenue really isn't what it could be potentially. And I think there's a good case to be made for saying, well, let's transition from a tax on the estate at the end of a life of someone, 11 million or more at this point, to a tax on the recipients. And you could even treat inheritances as a form of income. Here we're talking about taxing work and taxing income. Why wouldn't you tax, if I inherited $5 million, why above a certain threshold wouldn't I pay an income tax on that? If I win the lottery, I have to pay taxes on that. If I find a bag of money, theoretically, I'm supposed to claim it and pay taxes on it. But if I inherit it from my aunt, who I'm not close to, as Erica said, I don't have to pay any taxes on it. So I think then it's less about, not a death tax, but it's a tax on heirs. And I think politically that might be an easier case to say, well, these folks were just born lucky. They were just born on third base and they inherited all this money. A portion of that should go back to pay the society that made it possible for them to have the opportunities that they had.
One thing I think that should really upset people about this stepped up basis with this, built-in dynastic program is that if you get out of all of those taxes, by changing the basis, if you give that stock away, you get the whole tax deduction. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's tax-free, then you give it away, then you don't have to pay taxes. So it's like double. Let's see. So, Senator, one thing I'd love for you to talk a little bit about. We saw this in the last CARES package that Mitch McConnell doesn't want to pass aids to the states, and the states, unlike the federal government, have to have money in, money out, a direct correlation. So they collect this much in taxes. That's how much they have to spend. The tax revenues at the state level have gone down substantially during COVID. McConnell is unwilling to backstop the states. But there will have to be an intersection between state tax policy and federal tax policy on a going forward basis and dividing up who's going to pay for all of this stuff. So how will you all at the federal level lead that conversation over the course of the next year?
Well, first, let me say with respect to the next round of coronavirus emergency relief, it's essential that it include federal funds for state and local governments. As you said, states are facing a double whammy right now. Revenues are not coming in as they used to, and their obligations are increased because of the needs of the people of our states and local communities. And so those expenditures go up while the revenues go down, and they do have balanced budget requirements at the state level that obviously don't apply at the federal level. Yeah, Mitch McConnell cavalierly said, just let them go bankrupt months ago, and he's sort of pursued that line ever since. As you know, the HEROES Act, both the first version and HEROES 2, does contain substantial support for the states. And I do believe that at some point after this election, we will get a robust bill through. I don't know if it'll be in the lame duck or after January 20th, but we'll see. Now, look, in terms of, as you know, different states have very different systems of taxation and rely on different, parts of it, their share of sales tax versus income tax. You're from Maryland, so in our state, we have a state income tax, and then we have local county piggyback taxes. To the extent that states are strapped, obviously it just pushes the burden of increasing taxes from the federal government onto states, and then we have this. Unfortunately, then you have the race to the bottom among states that sort of say, well, we've got to cut taxes in our state because otherwise people are threatening to move to another one. And that reduces services and investment in schools and transportation. So the best way to reduce the race to the bottom is for the federal government to assume a greater share of responsibility for infrastructure. We need a major investment in infrastructure for education. I've proposed dramatically increasing our federal investment in Title I and meeting our responsibilities under the Individuals for the IDEA special ed. So my view is that the federal government should take on many more responsibilities than it has today.
And one thing to point out to the audience also, a lot of times at the state level, those taxes are regressive, a sales tax, because it charges everybody the same amount. So you're actually penalizing poor people more at the state level. And then when they cut income taxes, they start increasing fees and fines. So a speeding ticket goes to, $100,
Sure.
whatever. One question, how would removing the cap on state and local tax deductions, a top priority of the minority leader, make the tax code more equitable? Now, Senator, I'll punt this to you also. I'll say from our point of view, organizationally, we do not think that we don't think people should get a tax deduction for their state and local taxes. So do you want to address that?
So sure. Well, let me first of all put this in the context as how this happened, though, right? So this was Republicans wanted to raise revenue to increase tax breaks for the very wealthy. I mean, this was part of their bill in 2017. And so what they did was cap the state and local SALT deduction. Just to be clear, they used that revenue to give even bigger tax breaks to very wealthy people. The second thing is and I understand the concerns on SALT because when the people taking those deductions are people in the upper middle, and wealthy. I would say that the Trump tax cuts primarily went to the very wealthy. But to the extent that you are double taxing people at the state level, I will say you're making it harder for states to raise the revenue that they think they need for schools and transportation. Because in the state of Maryland, now as a Maryland taxpayer, I pay my dollar to Maryland. And I'm going to be taxed on that at the federal level as well. So, my view on this is that there's some way we should be able to preserve the ability of states to have the flexibility. And this is why you look, blue states, there is obviously a political dimension to this. It came after blue states. Blue states tend to invest more in our schools, in our transportation systems. And, I think that there's a great benefit for that. And we have to be careful not to disincentivize that benefit, which is what they did. So look, I'm happy to have a discussion on all of this, but I want people to know that was a pure political move. It wasn't just let's look at that in the context of an overall plan to reduce tax breaks for higher income individuals.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Senator. So we have 1 minute left. Let's do a lightning close from Morris, Stephen, and Chuck, and then Senator we'll ask you to close this up for the day. Morris, couple thoughts. We've got about a minute left.
Yeah, thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate your acknowledging that the whole point of the Republicans is to decrease investment in things like education and transportation, and that's what they want to do. So thank you for recognizing that.
Stephen?
In reading over the questions, it's funny that you talk to people or read in the press what people, constituents, say, well, what are you going to do, Senator? What are you going to do, Congressman? What people don't understand is, what are you going to do? You've got to vote, first of all. You got to get out and vote. And you have to vote for people who are going to do the things that the country needs. Don't listen to their BS. Don't get caught up in these smoke screens that they throw out there. Vote for people who care more about America than they do even themselves.
Chuck?
And I would just thank the senator for your leadership. I think you're a great explainer of these issues. I'd love to have you in front of many, many more people. Thank you for your leadership on the surtax, the millionaire surtax, which I think you explained, perfectly as a great first step, of raising revenue. So thank you for being where you are.
Same thing as a Maryland resident. I'm a big fan, Senator. So you want to close this up today? And I'll just remind everybody to go to taxtherich.com. If you have any comments about our presentation, please let us know. We always want to improve it. And if you would like to host a gathering where we present the same thing but talk to different folks, please let us know. We'd be happy to come. Any Rotary Club, anything. We just want to talk to as many folks as possible. Senator Van Hollen, close this up.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I want to start by thanking Patriotic Millionaires for really amplifying this issue and focusing on this issue so that we can get to the position where we have a majority in the House and the Senate and somebody in the White House who will follow through and really very radically change and reform what I described at the outset as a national scandal, which is our tax code, which simply takes a already bad situation in terms of wealth and income inequality and makes it worse. We would want a tax code that does the opposite, that reduces income and wealth inequality, that really reflects the idea behind America, which is that everybody who works hard should, have a shot at success. And we need to be rewarding work and not have a tax code that disproportionately rewards, leisure and investments. But that's what we have today. So we want to change this because we also need to make these really important investments in making work pay. We need to create more systems that ensure that people get a fair and livable wage, that people have the capacity to save themselves, and that they can build wealth themselves. And so that's what this is all about. In my view, reforming the tax code is all about really living up and making good on what we call the American dream.
Great. Thank you so much, y'all. Thanks to everybody for being here. Y'all have a fabulous afternoon. Thank you, Senator, so much. You were wonderful.
Thank you all. Thank you all. And for all who are listening.
Thank you.